Yes.
Yes.
And it seems to me that there's a particular joy throughout the biography, even though you're writing about things that were more than vexing
Yes.
to the Dickinson family.
Yes.
Wild nights that were created a lot of trouble for the family, etc.
Yeah.
But can you talk about? Am I right in my perception that there is a
Yes.
kind of joy that you have as the
Yes.
biographer?
Yes, I think that the joy is in reading.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, biography is to me reading.
Mm-hmm.
And there could be theoretically as many biographies as there are readers. I don't think that there is such a thing as definitive biography.
Right.
You know, I don't believe that there's any last word on any life. But there is, you're right, there is a sense of, and one enters then as a reader into the spirit, one hopes, of the writer. Or perhaps it's better more accurate to say that each one of us probably has, you know, my Emily Dickinson, you have your Emily Dickinson,
right.
and we each have something we particularly delight in. And some people might delight in Emily Dickinson, the gardener,
right.
you know, and I actually, because of my own nature, I delighted in the volcanic Emily Dickinson.
Yes.
I really delighted in the poems about Vesuvius and Etna, you know, and speaking through buckled lips of an earthquake.
Right.
I really like that hugely explosive groundswell. And then other Emily Dickinsons, and there's the merry Emily Dickinson, there's the flirt.
Oh, yes.
Wife Without the Sign.
Absolutely.
There's the intense, emotional Emily Dickinson who adored Jane Humphrey, and then Susan Dickinson, and then also Judge Lord in a different way. And she's ardent.
Yes.
I do like the ardent Emily Dickinson as well.
Yes, I do too.
And I love her humour.
Yes.
I tell you what,
She's
the English,
very funny, yes.
the English have enjoyed at literary
please
festivals.
do.
Because as you move from one to another, you pick up what audiences like, and then you tend to bring it up.
Right.
And they seem to be very awake when I talk about Emily Dickinson's year at Mount Holyoke and with Miss Lyon, and how she defied or held out against Miss Lyon.
Right.
When Miss Lyon, what the English like is, Miss Lyon consigns her to the lowest of three categories of student: the saved, the hopeful, and the remnant of no-hopers.
Right.
Only about 30 girls in the college were no-hopers.
And Emily Dickinson was one of those.
Yes. So I thought that there's a very strong spirit in her.
Yes.
And it's that she doesn't easily give up control.
Yes.
I mean, when I say control, I don't mean something dull. I think it's genius control, that she has a belief in her gift. As Charlotte Bronte's juvenilia shows a huge belief in herself, in the few good essays she did for Monsieur Heger when she was his student in Brussels, and when she hadn't yet done anything of genius. She knew she had it, and it was going to come.
I think that's one of the most astute things that Adrienne Rich wrote about her. Genius knows itself.
That was a wonderful essay.
It is.
It was.
And Vesuvius at home.
Vesuvius at home.
Yes.
Exactly.
And I agree with you. I do think that Dickinson knew that and had a confidence, a bedrock.
And she says, a still volcano life.
Yes.
Wonderful definition of the life as she saw it. Or my life had stood a loaded gun.
Yes. As the title of your book.
Yes. So there was joy. Yes. There's joy also, I'd say, in moments of research. I mean, for me, writing biography, the best period is definitely the early period when you asking questions, formulating lines of thought, and particularly doing the work in archives.
Yes.
I love that. I love those. There's certain moments when you suddenly see where the story is going.
Yes.
And one such moment was when I was in archives, both at Yale and at the Houghton Library, reading the transcripts of the trial of 1898, when suddenly a new thought occurred to me when Mabel Loomis Todd had been accused of fraud by the Dickinson family. because she was, as you know, claiming land, and
Right.
they didn't agree that she deserved it. That's a question to be discussed. She may have deserved it because she'd put in so many years of editing,
Right.
Emily Dickinson. But the Dickinson's lawyer, particularly the lawyer of Lavinia, Emily's sister, led the discussion, led the cross-examination on the witness stand of Mabel Loomis Todd towards her acquisition of the first plot of land. And this is this agitation for a plot of land on which she can build a house, and a house that would be comfortable for assignations with her lover, this was mooted in the summer of 1885 when Emily Dickinson was still alive.
Right.
I won't go into the details of the drama in the courtroom, but what absolutely fascinated me, and I didn't know, was that Mabel Todd was pushed by the Dickinson's lawyer to say what she paid for the land. Of course, she paid nothing, and when she'd acquired it.
Right.
And in the end, she was up against the wall, so she put the whole onus on her husband. She said, I didn't know anything about it, but she often behaved in a passive, very ladylike way.
Right.
So she said, my husband did all the dealings. So poor David Todd was called to the witness stand, and the lawyers forced him to acknowledge that they paid nothing for the land. In other words, it was a reward for sexual favors,
Right.
which Mabel was trying to avoid saying. But when he was pressed about when they got it, he had to agree it was after Miss Emily died.
Right.
That phrase gripped me, because
And surprised
actually
you.
surprised me, because we thought of Emily Dickinson somehow as remote from
Right.
adversarial action. But I began to realize that she must have refused to sign the deed to
Right.
the land, and it had to wait. And within 3 weeks of Emily Dickinson's death, the deed was signed, and the Dell, Mabel Loomis Todd's house, rose red and prominent on the Dickinson meadow.
Right.
So really, in some way, I mean, she was waiting for Emily Dickinson
Waiting
to die.
for Emily Dickinson to die.
To die. I mean, even while she absolutely revered her. I mean, I don't want to minimize how much she revered the poetry,
Right.
and she was one of only 3, Susan was another, to recognize the genius during the poet's lifetime.
Well, and of course, Susan introduced her to
And
the
Susan
poetry.
introduced her, and I think she saw it at once, and she longed to be face to face
Right.
with Emily Dickinson. And I think that there was I think as evidence built up, it became clearer and clearer to me that Emily Dickinson took a stand,
Yes.
and that she wasn't remote from the fissure in the family.
No.
And that I began to read her letters and notes to her brother's mistress, to Mabel, and I was led by their tone. Normally her letters were to people like her cousins, to Susan, loving.
Yes.
And you can read them. Whereas her notes to Mabel Loomis Todd were inaccessible. They were riddling. And I decided that I'd better try and unpick the riddles. Now, one has to say they are so dense, those riddles, that although I've tried to read them, it's
Right.
only a try. Other people may read those riddles differently
Well,
in time to come. But I saw Emily Dickinson taking a stand and warning Mabel Loomis Todd that she saw what she was doing. And she talks in one of her letters more openly to Mabel as Egypt.
Yes.
That is Cleopatra.
Yes.
And she talks further about the entangled Antony.
Yes.
So she actually, that suggests she sympathized with her brother
Yes.
to some degree.
To some degree, yes.
The entangled Antony. And she, of course, loved her brother and looked up to him. And as 19th century women, she and Lavinia were dependent on their brother,
That's right.
who ran all their affairs.
And people
So
often forget that.
I see Emily Dickinson doing something very brave
Yes.
in the last dying year, shall
Yes.
we say. And one of the riddles is about Thermopylae.
Ah.
And when we think of Thermopylae, in Herodotus, the historian, it's about a group of brave fighters who are fighting to the death. It's their last stand. So I feel that there's a coded statement from Emily Dickinson that this is a fight to the death.
Yes, and she's going to stand.
Yes.
Yes,
So
she's
I
taking a
got
stand.
an admirable picture of her as somebody who, she couldn't say anything overtly because of her respect for her brother.
And her financial dependence
And
on
her
him.
dependence
Yes.
on his handling of her life. But she nevertheless had the courage. And once I picked that up from the court case, a letter I'd never understood before became clear to me, a letter she wrote to her beloved nephew, Austin and Susan's son, Ned, in the summer, that very summer when discussion of the land began,
Right.
where she says 3 times in this letter to Ned, "You can rely on me, lad. There'll be no treason. Yours fondly, Aunt Emily."
Yes.
Then it suddenly jumped out at me, oh, it's Ned and his sister would, in line to inherit this land.
Right.
And she wasn't going to
She wasn't
let them,
going to.
she wasn't going to do them down with a
Right.
signature.
Right. Very important to recognize.
Isn't it important
It is.
to recognize that courage of, that was action. It
Yes.
wasn't just retreat into an airy world of her own.
Yes.
It took nerve.
It
I
did
think
take nerve.
I think she had a lot of nerve.
She
and
was full of courage, I
She
think.
was full of courage, and she also had the merriment that sometimes goes with courage.
Yes.
I think she enjoyed writing those letters.
Oh,
and I
yes.
think Mabel, she must have guessed that Mabel had the wit to decipher them.
Maybe so, or maybe not. Who knows?
Anyway, she entertained herself, but
Yes.
possibly she did convey a message to Mabel one way or another, certainly as Egypt. And I think that Mabel got it when she records in her diary that she's received a gift from the homestead of some adder's tongue.
Ah.
And of course, adder's tongue is a plant, but I think it's suggestive.
Yes, it's
Why
a very.
send a gift?
Yeah, why send a gift of
gift.
an adder's tongue?
Yes.
Yes. It suggests
Yes,
Emily recognizes some deception,
yes,
etc.
I think so.
Yes. Well, it's been really wonderful talking with you. And I have one more question. You
Right.
anticipated one of my questions, which
Yes.
was, were there surprises when you were writing the biography? And you
Yes.
anticipated that.
That one, yes.
But I'd like to close with, do you have a very particular poem that is
Yes.
your
Yes,
favorite?
I
Yes.
do.
Okay.
I do. And this was something quite long ago that sort of surfaced for me. A friend in Oxford who, alas, is dead, but she was a very inspiring high school teacher. She taught both my daughters, and she arranged an evening for her friends, it was totally private, where she asked each of us to bring along a poem that we liked to read and then discuss.
Oh, wonderful.
So I thought Emily Dickinson, and I looked through many poems I liked,
Yes.
but I picked I tie my hat, I crease my shawl. Life's little duties do, as though the very least were infinite to me. I put new flowers in the glass, I throw the old away, I brush a petal from my gown that anchored there. I weigh the time, it will be till 6 o'clock. I have so much to do. And yet, existence, some way back, stopped, struck, my ticking through.
Wonderful.
That's wonderful. And then she goes on in the poem to say, I've got a bomb with a capital
Yes.
B, a bomb in my bosom. Nay, hold it. It is calm. That is control of genius.
Yes, it is. It is indeed. Well, Lyndall Gordon, thank you very
It's
much.
a pleasure.
This is Martha Nell Smith for the Emily Dickinson International Society. Lyndall Gordon, the most recent biographer of Emily Dickinson.